Hello everyone! Because we all tend to play too stereotypically or automatically in openings, I've prepared a special training session for you today. So let's take a look at this first position. It's white's move, and black has just moved the rook to e8. I'm going to work through these combinations with you. What might already make us think that a combination is possible? Well, you have to look at all the combinatorial clues, meaning anything that's problematic for your opponent, anything that might make us think or that a sequence of moves could let us win. So what are these combinatorial clues? Well, anything related to the king's insecurity or lack of protection or direct confrontations. And in this position, right away we can spot the bishop-king alignment, which is dangerous for the king, and the lack of protection for the f7 pawn. That alone should prompt us to look at what happens if we capture the pawn with check. Moreover, when calculating, we'll focus first on checks, then captures, then threats. But we calculate checks first because they force the opponent to respond, and ultimately there aren't many options for the opponent when we give a check. By the way, after bishop takes on f7 with check, what is he going to do? If he doesn't capture, not only do we win the pawn, but we'll win the rook afterwards as well. And if he does capture, we need to look at how the attack continues. We only have the knight that can join the attack, so knight to g5, check. We realize that if the king moves to f8, there will be knight to e6, the royal fork attacking both the king and the queen. And after f7, king takes, knight to g5. If the king moves to g8, we still go to e6 onto that weak square. Because we're going to attack the queen, who is trapped, it's also true that there was this combinatorial clue, the fact that the queen was boxed in. So f7, knight to g5, and now knight to e6. And we've solved the exercise, so now let's see if the player found it. The player is rated 1756. He's playing against a player rated 1778. And let's take a look right away. So, this was a game played with 3 minutes plus 2 seconds, a blitz game, so it's a pretty fast-paced game. And no, in the position when black played rook to e8, white played rook to e1. So you see, that's a bit of an automatic move. Bishop to f7 was possible. New exercise. Black has just taken the pawn on d4. We're at the 10th move of this game, so still in the opening, and so we need to look at the different combinatorial clues. What do we notice? We notice this pressure on the bishop, which is just barely protected twice. We notice the pawn on f7, which lacks protection and is attacked by the bishop. Are there any other interesting combinatorial clues? We can observe that the rook is unprotected. It's actually interesting that it's unprotected. Because when we calculate check, capture, threat, normally I should calculate bishop to f7 check as a priority. But here, at the same time that I noticed the rook was unprotected, I saw that the captures were problematic for black. Because if I take and the knight recaptures, there will be this move bishop to e5, which will attack the knight a second time and the rook. And if the knight recaptures with the queen, I can exchange queens. And every time this move bishop to e5 is very painful for black. So this capture seems winning, but since I'm thorough, I'm still going to look at bishop takes f7 check, because after all, there might be a mating attack. So we have to look, bishop takes f7 check, king takes. We can continue with knight to g5 check, a bit like in the other exercise, but the king can go back to e8 for example. And this time we don't have any entry on e6, the bishop is guarding it, I don't see any follow-up. So of course you have to calculate the check, but it doesn't always work, and here it doesn't work. So I'm going to take the bishop. There we go, the queen recaptures. For now we're doing well in the exercise, we exchange queens and play bishop to e5, the fork that will win a piece. So in this game, the player with the white pieces was rated 1916. Let's see if he found the solution. So after bishop takes d4, he found it. He played knight takes, there was queen takes, the queens were exchanged, and he correctly found the move bishop to e5. However, he made a mistake on the next move. After knight takes c2, he should have taken the rook, leaving his own rook, but instead he played rook to c1 to attack the knight, and as a result, his opponent played f6 to attack the bishop. So in this position, he should have taken the rook, and after knight takes, you recapture with the bishop, and you end up a piece ahead. So he found the initial sequence, but made a mistake right after. New exercise, this time it's a game that was played with a 10-minute time control, because the previous game was played with 2 minutes plus 1 second increment. So it's understandable to make mistakes, because there isn't much time. But here, it's a 10-minute game, and we're only on move 9. White has just played bishop to d3. What should we do? They're attacking the queen. So here, we can see that the white king isn't very well protected, the g2 pawn is undefended, so we might think about capturing, but be careful, the bishop on d3 will take on g6. That's white's idea, because after all, the black king is also weak. So you have to calculate check, capture, threat. When we calculate checks as a priority, there are several checks in the position, but we want to play bishop to g4 to bring another piece into the attack, of course. The opponent is forced to play f3, he takes back, queen takes f3, check. The king has to move, or the bishop has to come to e2, and then we can take the rook with check. So that's the move. Bishop to g4, he takes, the king comes here, we give a check. He comes here, and now the computer asks me to find yet another move. If I take the h2 pawn, there could be a capture on g6. So we'll go back to e4, give a check, and defend. Now let's see if the player found it. It was a player rated 1669. And so he found the sequence. After bishop d3, there was indeed bishop g4, f3, bishop takes, queen h1. So he did find this sequence. Well done to him. New sequence. Black has just played bishop to f5. Their bishop was attacked by the pawn. So what are we going to look at? As always, the king's safety. So the black king hasn't castled yet. There's this pressure on f7, a pawn that's not very well defended, the bishop on f5, which is also undefended. The king, as I said, is not safe. He hasn't castled. In fact, he's even lost the right to do so, and the rook controls all the squares. So I think it's these various combinatorial clues that can make us think a combination is possible. The player with the white pieces is rated 1690. So the first move to look at is bishop takes f7, of course. So bishop takes f7, check. The king takes. Is there a follow-up? For now, I don't see one. It could be interesting if, for example, we had the knight on f3, which could join the attack, but that's not the case here. Also note that the c7 pawn is unprotected and can be taken. That might be a threat. So the threats are going to be mainly threats to attack the pieces or even to try to checkmate this king. Because after all, the c7 pawn isn't very well protected, but it's not the bishop that should take it. Maybe it's the knight. I'm looking at knight to b5 because if I can play knight takes c7, that's checkmate. And so after knight to b5, if he tries to defend with rook to c8, we can play knight takes c7. If rook takes, we recapture, and in the end, we will have traded a knight for a rook and a pawn. That's a very positive sequence. After knight to b5, maybe the opponent will play another move. What options are there? For example, there's e5 to attack the bishop and clear the square. Knight takes c7, check, and that's a fork. We're attacking the king and the rook, which is also undefended. So knight to b5 is the right move. Rook to c8 is played. Knight takes c7, and we win the exchange, and a pawn for the knight. Did the 1690 rated player find the sequence? Let's take a look. So after bishop to f5, no, he didn't find the sequence. He didn't think of knight to b5. He played the move e4 here. And you can notice that he played the move. Actually, you can't see it, but he played the move in 1 second. So he played the move way too quickly. So after e4, you might think we're attacking the bishop and we can still play knight to b5. But black could play e5 and counterattack white's own bishop while freeing up their own. And now knight to b5 will be less effective because the c7 pawn can be defended, since the bishop will no longer be able to work together with the knight to attack the c7 pawn. So in this position, white has just played knight to f3. What problems does white have? The white king is still in the center. That said, he can castle very quickly. Are there any unprotected pieces for white? Apart from the two rooks, which are not easy to attack, I don't see any unprotected pieces. On the other hand, we can see this bishop facing off against the other bishop. The queen is defending. The queen is quite easy to destabilize. However, we are suffering from the pin along the diagonal. So let's see what happens if we take on c3. He can simply recapture. He develops, and we've lost a knight for nothing. Even if we take his bishop, the queen can recapture. So that capture doesn't work. Knight takes on f2, king takes or bishop takes. That doesn't seem to work either. So what moves do we have left? Checks don't work, captures don't work. So we need to look at threats. If I play a6, what squares does the queen have? Here we realize that she doesn't actually have many squares. The queen would have squares like c4 or a4, but that gives me the idea to attack the queen differently, with knight to d6. Because that frees up the attack on the bishop on d3, we saw that the bishop on d3 was only protected by the queen. So we had noticed this alignment, and the bishop that was only protected by the queen, and the queen was easy to destabilize. I was talking about the move a6, but actually it's going to be knight to d6. We attack the queen, we reveal the bishop, and the knight controls the c4 square, so the queen won't be able to protect, so we're going to win a piece. Knight to d6. The queen moves to a4, and we take the bishop. Did the player find it? That's what we're going to check. The player rated 1991 after knight f3, found knight d6. Queen to a4, he found the sequence, so bishop takes d3. Congratulations to him as well, especially in a pretty fast time control. It was a 3-minute game. New position, and we're only at the 8th move of the game. A game that was played with 10 minutes plus 5 seconds increment, so here the players have time. So here we need to look at the combinatorial clues, things that might make us think a combination is possible. And it seems there are a lot of them, because the king is not safe. He hasn't managed to castle yet. The bishop is unprotected. There's this bishop-queen alignment. The knight on f6 is pinned. The pawn on a4 is weak. There are a lot of problems for black. Of course, it's true, our knight is under attack, but it's worth calculating. We only have one check, which is queen to h5, but it does not work. The knight takes us. Even if we take the queen, the king recaptures, and there is no follow-up for us. So the checks don't work. But maybe not right away. I'm really tempted to play queen to h5. Because if the knight weren't there, I could attack the king and the unprotected bishop. So we can play bishop takes, he can recapture with the queen, but then queen to h5 check, he'll play a move to defend his king, but it doesn't matter, because after that, we take the bishop and win a piece. So bishop takes, queen to h5 check, he comes to g6, and he'll still counterattack on g2. But at worst, we'll castle queenside, queen takes. And you see, if he takes the g2 pawn, we castle queenside, both rooks protect each other, and I don't really see any problem. Maybe even after queen takes g2, we can go after the king, give him some checks first. Did the player find it? That's what we're going to look at. So after the capture on c6, he found it, he played bishop takes, queen takes. There was indeed queen to a5 check, g6, and the bishop was indeed captured. So a good sequence for white. New position. Here, we can see that black hasn't developed, but they've managed to win some pawns. Because white only has 5 pawns left, while black still has 7. So black is 2 pawns up, the queen has infiltrated white's camp and is attacking the rook. But the problem with this strategy of grabbing pawns is that sometimes the pawns are poisoned and the queen can't get away. So here, of course, the queen is at the heart of white's setup, so white can try to surround her and trap her. We should consider moves like rook to g1 or rook to h2. We need to look at that. But let's look at the other problems black has. The bishop is unprotected and the king is still in the center. I don't see any other problems for black, so it must revolve around trapping the queen. Now, if we play rook to g1, the queen can take the pawn on h3. It's true that we can keep attacking with moves like knight to g5, but the queen can return to her own side. So let's also look at the move rook to h2. Rook to h2 is actually more effective. The queen has no squares to retreat to. g3 is controlled by the pawn, g4 by the other pawn, g5 by the queen and the knight, and g6 by the bishop. So here, you shouldn't rush with rook to g1. You need to trap the queen with rook to h2. The queen moved to g6, so we capture. Did the player find it? Queen takes g2, he found rook to h2. So he won the queen. It's interesting because the player who got caught with the black pieces is still rated 2,439. A very strong player, and he got his queen trapped. What were the last moves? It was h3. He went to take the g2 pawn, which was actually a poisoned pawn. He would have been better off just keeping his extra pawn, retreating and trying to finish his development, because here he's behind in development. For example, he could have come to e6 to offer a queen exchange, protected by his bishop, by the way, because if the queens are exchanged, he'll have a much better chance to make use of his extra pawn in the endgame than if the queens are still on the board. After all, white has a lot of development, dynamism, and attacking potential. New position. White has just played knight to e5 in this game between players rated over 2,200. The player with the white pieces is rated 2,207 and his opponent is almost 2,300. He has just played knight to e5, so obviously everyone notices the queen-king alignment, everyone sees the lack of protection for the f2 pawn. So we're tempted to play queen takes f2, check, which, by the way, matches what I explained to you about checks. However, here I'm not convinced that it's actually check. Because if we play queen takes f2 check, he goes to h1. And then what? We don't really have any follow-up to work with. Everything seems protected in white's camp. We're actually missing 2 pieces to attack. So I'm not interested in the check, but rather in capturing the f2 pawn with the knight. That attacks the queen and sets up a discovered attack, meaning that as soon as the knight moves, there will be this check. And actually, after knight takes f2, we can then play knight to h3 with this double check. And maybe there's a chance to pull off the famous smothered mate. If you don't know it, maybe we'll see it now. So knight takes f2. He goes to f1, so we take the queen. But if he had saved his queen, for example, I don't know, queen to d2, actually there aren't many squares to save it. Then we can play knight to h3, double check. If the king goes to f1, we have queen to f2 mate, or queen to g1 mate. And if the king goes to h1, we have this move, queen to g1 check. The king can't take because of the knight, so the rook is forced to capture. We've sacrificed the queen, but it's to block the square, to plug it up. And now that the king is blocked, knight to f2, and we have this smothered mate, because the king can't breathe, he's blocked by his own pieces and pawn from his own side. A magnificent mate. So in this position, indeed, knight takes f2 was spotted by the player with the black pieces. But that means the player with the white pieces, rated 2200, still allowed this possibility to happen. And this was only on the 8th move of the game. Alright, new position. We're on the 10th move. The player with the white pieces is rated 1670, and it's a 15-minute game with a 10-second increment. There's plenty of time. So of course, black has just castled right now. What do we notice? The unprotected bishop. We can also notice that the queen is the only piece that has left the black camp. And when you bring your queen out in front of your army in the opening, the queen risks being harassed, getting trapped. What we want here, since there are no checks, there are captures, of course. You have to look at bishop takes knight, pawn takes pawn, but bishop takes knight is silly. It would just help black develop, plain and simple. Pawn takes pawn might be possible. Black will recapture. What really interests me here is a threatening move. It's the move bishop to d3. Take advantage of the lack of squares for the queen. Because the bishop attacks, the other bishop pins, and the queen is trapped. There's this offensive trio like a trident, all aiming at the queen. And there are simply no squares left. So bishop to d3, and it's over. f5 was played. So it's not over yet, but there's the en passant capture. The queen retreats. So it's still not over. We've won a pawn. But now we're going to win the piece, of course. We'll play pawn takes bishop. And not f7, because the rook could take. Pawn takes bishop, and we've won a piece in this offensive sequence. Did the player see it? Well, no. After kingside castling, he didn't play bishop to d3. He couldn't resist playing this irresistible push to d6 here. And as a result, black played bishop to g5. And that changes everything because now there's the offer to exchange bishops. And if we go back to d3, now the queen has squares. She could, for example, come to h6, sheltered by her own bishop. This position is interesting because we can see that the black king has been driven away from the king side. And you'd like to take the bishop, but you'd lose the rook in the process. So you still have to calculate carefully. In this position, there is one check. There's bishop to b4, which needs to be considered. Probably c3 will be played. As for captures, there's the capture of the bishop. Sometimes it can be interesting to leave the rook if you're able to trap the queen. Maybe that's the idea, actually. Look, if you take the bishop, he takes the rook. Is there a way to trap that queen? For example, if we play bishop to h6, I wanted to play bishop h6 here so that the queen would defend and trap the queen, but there's the bishop on c1 that could capture. So maybe pawn takes bishop doesn't work because of queen takes rook. Or maybe I just can't find anything in this position. So we said check, bishop b4, c3. I don't see the point. I free up the square and escape, but what do I actually do with that escape square? Not much. So the capture, we said the queen could take the rook. It still seems a bit suspicious that the queen can just take the rook like that. Because she comes into our position and she's not supported. But I don't see how to attack her. Oh wait, maybe I do see how to attack her. Actually, if the knight weren't there, we could play bishop check, and the queen-to-queen alignment would allow us to win her queen. That is, after pawn takes, queen takes rook, what's bothering us is the knight, but we're starting to get rid of the knight. So after pawn takes, queen takes rook, knight to h6. He's not forced to play bishop takes. I'm bishop b4 check to take queen. He plays queen f6. As my knight's not on g8, this queen exchange. So pawn takes bishop, queen takes rook. How do I get rid of this knight? I don't see it. Well, I'm stuck on this position. It's normal, maybe we can play king to d6, develop the knight, attack the pawn, but it's too easy for white to defend and solve their problems. I think it comes down to taking here, accepting to lose the rook, but the presence of the knight is bothering me. I don't know. Did you find it? You can let me know in the comments if you found this sequence. So I'm just going to go for it a little. Take a chance by capturing the bishop and see what happens. So I take the bishop and it's not the right move. So that wasn't it. So what does the computer say? I'm going to ask for a hint. I can ask for a hint. It shows that it's the bishop that should move. If it's the bishop that should move, it must be bishop to b4 check, but I actually don't see why. That's it. I'm missing something. So maybe bishop to b4 check. I could play bishop to g7 to defend the rook and attack the pawn, but he can save his bishop in the meantime. Maybe that's simply it, actually. I'm going to play that. No. So it's telling me it's not bishop to b4, it's not bishop to e7, it's not bishop to g7. Maybe bishop to h6 to attack his bishop. And if he takes, I take on g6 and his bishop would be pinned. But that's a devilish idea. It's bishop to h6, look, he takes. And we take back on g6, pinning his bishop. So even if queen takes on g6, we can take his bishop afterwards. Ah yes, this bishop to h6 move, this threat to take his bishop here. And to intercept the attack on our rook, it's devilish, but I didn't see it. We end on this failed exercise. I wonder if the player saw it, but I don't think so. He's rated 1600. I don't think he saw this sequence. So on the capture on e5, indeed, he didn't see it either. He played the move knight to c6, which actually seems like a logical move. We develop the knight, we attack the pawn, but times 6, that wins an incredible piece. I don't know what you think about it in the comments. Did you have this move? I'm really curious. We'll stop on this failed exercise. After all, we succeeded with others, it was good practice, and if you like this format, we can do more of them. I really like all these opening exercises. They show that right from the very first moves, you have to be attentive because sometimes players focus mainly on developing their pieces, trying to castle, or sticking to their usual opening patterns without taking advantage of specific opportunities to win material. If you enjoyed it, you can give me a thumbs up, leave comments, share the video, and support the channel as usual. And we'll meet again soon for new chess adventures. Goodbye, everyone.